IVM.
Welcome to Think Fast, where this is being recorded pre-Holi because we are really colorful people. We thought we'll bring some color into this recording before color smacks everybody in the face tomorrow, day after, whenever you are celebrating this. It is by far my most favorite festival. I'm saying this I'm lying. I hate celebrating Holi, but I am giving it another shot this year. How is your Holi plans going? Are you going to be dunking yourself into some Kalakatta pani?
No, I am doing what you should do, which is using it as a reason to get the hell out of Delhi and, couple it with the weekend. I'm actually escaping to the mountains, man. I'm very excited. Look at me. I'm a transformed person, guys. I'm taking holidays. Wow. I'm going to the mountains.
Taking many pauses, are you? Taking many pauses in your life?
Oh, taking so many pauses. Meaningful, purposeful pauses.
Yes. But is the news taking a pause is the question? Because from the way we're looking at it, there seems to be a lot happening. I was actually, full honesty for everybody who's listening and watching in, I was like, chhod dete hain is hafta episode, festival week hai. But Suchita said, no, there's a lot to talk about. So I'm going to let you say what is there to talk about.
Yes, I went full Rani ki Jhansi on this Jhansi ki Rani moment.
Rani ki Jhansi. She went fully Rani ki Jhansi. Fair enough. But I must tell you before we start, and while you are like losing yourself, I was in a creator summit yesterday in Bangalore, at the Under 25 summit, and I met a bunch of people who were fans of Think Fast, and they asked me to give you their love. And
Why are you
they all said
surprised?
yes, Queen.
We have
I'm not
many
surprised at all.
fans. And it's
Lots
so
of fans.
sweet, dude. I love
Good.
our fans. They message us and they, tweet about us and they keep telling us how much they love us. It's great for our egos. Please tell your friends also because we need to increase our listenership so we get more sponsorship. So apne friends ko batao, guys, and hit the subscribe button wherever it is. But getting back to my Jhansi ki Rani moment, which was amazing. We're going to edit that out, guys. We're going to edit that out. I'm smart. Don't forget.
No.
Okay. But just very quickly, today I learned, no, I did not learn this for the first time, but Varun and Jalasmi for the first time learned that the full form of GPT in Chat GPT is, say it with me,
Generative pre-trained transformer.
Wow, that's a fun fact for today. But just a couple of other interesting pieces of news. And we briefly discussed this in the last episode. So Snapchat is releasing its own AI chatbot powered by Chat GPT, and we briefly spoke about how will Chat GPT be a feature? You know what I mean? Like just the functionality of it. Put in a question and have someone give you a generative response. Do you think that's where things are going? Is Chat GPT the stories of the future?
So basically, it seems like everybody's adding a layer of AI. I know we spoke about the metaverse a while back, like how everybody was trying to add blockchain into everything they were doing. Then everybody was trying to get into the metaverse. Now everybody's adding some form of AI into their platform. And I think that's the way to go. We always saw this kind of coming, but I don't think it's necessarily, it's now a foundational layer on any platform which has taken it.
Yeah, fair enough. Segueing into the other story, which is women's IPL has begun. Are you excited about women's IPL?
Yeah, there's a decent amount of large buzz around the tournament, which is great to see. It's actually a great moment for women's cricket, right? Because you're seeing more interest happening and you see a lot more brands kind of like jumping into the bandwagon, which always, the more money comes in, more brands come in. Sports generally always kind of scale up. The stadium is full and people are sitting watching the match. I'm hoping that excitement continues through the tournament because it's the first edition. There's a lot to happen there, but so far it seems to be almost like a refreshing difference from just like watching way too much male cricket, which is like it's like a daily soap. It never goes away. They can just continue playing.
That is a fact. Another piece of news that you know more about than me.
But have you watched the match?
No.
Have you watched the match?
I haven't seen anything.
Please watch.
Yeah, guys.
You should
I don't watch
support
cricket,
the Delhi team.
Yeah, of course. No, but because it's women's cricket, yes. Just for that, on the occasion of Women's Day, I will watch women's IPL. I'm being sarcastic, guys. I'm being sarcastic. No, but everyone should genuinely watch women's IPL because to your point, I also think it does so much for like role model resetting in the Indian context,
100%,
right?
100%.
And I hope more of our female cricketers become role models, not just for women, but men as well.
It's interesting that I had a bunch of friends who made their sons sit and watch the first match and a few others, because they said, you keep always talking about Virat Kohli or, and Rohit Sharma, etc. But, you got to also get not just the push shouldn't be that make girls sit and watch the matches. I think boys need to sit and watch matches from a young age. So then you're seeing it as a multi-gender sport and not just a male-focused sport. And I thought that was refreshing to see. I saw a lot of people sharing that out there, and I think it was nice to see. On another sports note, Formula One's OTT platform, F1 TV, made a silent debut in India. It's great timing. There's been genuine excitement kind of growing around Formula One, especially after the Netflix Drive to Survive series, which honestly brought me back to Formula One. I'd stopped watching Formula One for years, and I got back to it in the last couple of years, primarily because of just watching the Netflix series. So it's great. It's not too heavily priced. It's about 249 rupees per month, or like $3,000 for the entire season. What you don't get on streaming, which you get here, is you can change camera angles, you get behind the scenes stuff, you get a lot more analytics and data, which is what you enjoy looking at if you're a Formula One fan, and all that stuff. So, and also I think there's some documentaries and extra content stuff. Very like NBA, like the NBA app, if anybody subscribes, has similar things there. So I think it's a smart move. India's becoming Formula One focused again, and it's a great time for them to cash in.
Woohoo! And guess who's not cashing in? Founders Fund has quietly cut the size of its 8th venture capital fund in half, from about 1.8 billion to around 900 million. Now, this piece of news is obviously making the rounds because Founders Fund is run by the infamous, Peter Thiel. And obviously Founders Fund isn't the first fund to sort of cut its fund size down. There's a fund called More Davido Ventures in 2002, which did this at the dawn of the dot-com crash. And then, we've also seen cuts of various sizes, anywhere in between 25 to about 50%, even by the likes of like Kleiner Perkins, Battery Ventures, and many more. So this isn't new news, but obviously it's, sent shockwaves for the very simple reason that we're already experiencing a big downturn as far as fundraising is concerned. But what do you make of this, man? Founders Fund usually focuses on a lot of early stage bets. Do you think your early stage space is going to see a little bit of a rationalization?
I also feel there are two things, right? One is obviously the market and looking at how it's been. I feel it also is the point when there are so many startups. I mean, the space has just been exploding to a level where I feel that everyone's getting smarter about it, at least because of the market. It'll be very easy for them to again go back to scale once the market improves, which should happen, I would say, by end of 23 or early 24. But I feel it's a smart thing. Peter Thiel has always been a smart person with these things, and early startups are the biggest. I mean, you tend to make the most, but also tend to lose the most in early stage. So when the market's bad, that stage you got to be a little careful with. If you're playing at scale, angel investments aren't going away, but the guys who play at scale are kind of being more careful, is at least my reading.
And just one sort of clarification over here, what Peter Thiel has done is, so for example, if the total fund size was about 1.8 billion, he's kept like 800 million for now and staggered the 1 billion for like, fund 4, fund 5. So it almost seems like they're just delaying deployment of money versus, you know what I mean?
Very
like
smart.
Pulling back on excitement around investment.
Yeah, and that's a good way to kind of also say that it's not like we're pulling out from the market in the long term. It's just saying, and I feel also people get it. In general, what you're seeing in terms of how angel decks are going around, you're seeing how people are using almost like a crowdsourced model for their rounds now. I've seen many brands do that, even in the Indian context in recent times and even globally. So you're seeing, I feel anybody who is a founder today understands that the market is very different from what people were talking about in 2020, 2021. And so I don't think it'll surprise anyone that they've done this.
Yup. But guess what's surprising? Estee Lauder Companies' Fabrizio Freda is the second most overpaid CEO among those at companies on the S&P 500, according to an annual ranking by a shareholder advocacy group. I did not know this was a thing. I
know. What is this overpaid CEO business? I think it's interesting because is there an underpaid CEO list as well? Can we put that up as well? Or best? If you're the CEO, I'm not going to say it. It's going to be a bad joke. It's going to be a bad joke on the second part of the name of this brand. So I will not make it. People know what I'm going to talk about.
Oh my God.
You get the point.
Varun.
It's an easy joke. I will not make it.
You are over the hill. You're over 40. These jokes cannot be said by you anymore. Leave them for the kids in this group. But what do you make of this? Yes. I think it's a fairly good practice, man, to, generally have comp transparency, at least, if nothing else.
Yeah. I think it's also a good way to kind of track and see, especially if these are public companies, and even in the other sense, this is obviously on the S&P 500, but it'd be interesting to see this even from a private sense, right? You're looking at startups with huge valuations and you kind of see how much the CEO is taking. In similar way, you're looking at companies like this, the profits need to match the salaries, and this is a good way to keep that in check. I don't know about this report. I haven't read it, all honesty, so I don't know how much this is built on top of, okay, let's just target a few areas and markets, but seems like a smart idea. Also a great way for HR to not give big bonuses next year.
That is true. And in other news, as per a tweet, Karan Bajaj is starting his new venture with somebody called Pranab Dash and somebody else called Trupti Makkar. The new venture will look to acquire Sunrise SMEs, a term that Varun and I cannot decipher what the hell it means, but we're assuming this is generally...
We Googled it, we couldn't find what it meant.
Yeah, but someone mentioned, I think, on the tweet saying, oh, are you referring to Thrasios of India, whatever else? Karan Bajaj is back, man. Man made infamous because of his White Hat Junior sale to Byju's is back in action. What do you make of this?
I think I like the second response to this tweet saying White Hat Junior wasn't a sunrise moment for him, it seems. I'm just leaving that tweet out there for everyone to get my response. I agree. I mean, I don't understand what a Sunrise SME is, so I can't comment, but... you'd want to see a little bit more clarity on what this business is before clarifying. Hopefully he's learned from the mistakes made at White Hat Junior, hence he's not mentioning White Hat Junior to move ahead. But again, people keep making up new companies. It is once a founder, always a founder.
That is true. That is true. When are you telling us about your next venture, Varun? Once a founder, always a founder. Speaking of which,
slow build in the background, but hopefully in like a few weeks, sometime in April is what I'm guessing.
Exciting. Why don't you lead us to the next set of newses?
Next, US petrochemicals giant Dow Inc. and Singapore government are doing something interesting. They're transforming old sneakers into playgrounds and running tracks. Reuters put this news up saying they're testing this by planting hidden trackers inside 11 pairs of donated shoes. So then they also know they've been used and stuff like that. It's interesting. I mean, it's obviously coming from a petrochemical giant. So I would still take many of these things with a pinch of salt, saying, is this one of those like, okay, let's do some CSR activity while we also
like
are
H&M launching a conscious line.
Sustainable. Exactly, a conscious line. But yeah, I mean, I always found this whole recycling and using it in public spaces to be an interesting thing to do. And it's good to see this happening. Just want to see what actually happens in reality. Although, if one government has to do it, you give the Singapore government or maybe someone running Dubai to do that because they know how to really build out
they know their
cities. Yeah, so I think this will have more results than you would expect.
Yup. And while Varun cleans his nosy, I am going to get to the next story, which is a company that both Varun and I love a hell of a lot, which is Razorpay. They just posted their FY 2022 results and their profit has risen by 20% to INR 7.3 crores with an operating revenue nearing 1,500 crores. I think they're the best run fintech company in India, period. Like, I do not think it gets better than them.
Without a doubt. Also, like, great product, well-run business, and so smartly kind of integrated across the entire commerce stream. I'm glad they're doing well because you can't really, you can't turn to anything which Razorpay has done and say, okay, they didn't do this right in a larger sense. They seem to have really built this out like a very structured, well-built business. And at the right time in the whole e-com space.
Yeah.
Like, who doesn't use Razorpay in their own shop is what I've seen. Everybody uses Razorpay.
I think that's the thing, right? Like, I remember we guys had discussed one of these stories of one of these companies that, was talking about MSMEs and how they're building for direct-to-consumer brands, blah, blah, bullshit. Remember, I'd gone on a rant about one of these companies in one of our last recordings.
You going on a rant is a very broad area to focus on because you have gone on a rant on many companies.
I know, but like it's always a select few, and it's usually on subject matters where I think I can say I know more than an average person, or not anything and everything under the sun. But I think the thing that I love about Razorpay is they've been so focused on their customer cohort, and obviously Razorpay's customers are businesses, not people like you and me, and they've really cracked this like customer of this customer base of, emerging brands and businesses across the board, right? Whether it's like tech product, whether it's consumer tech products or services like Urban Clap or, obviously more like D2C brands, and very nice founders. You don't see them projecting, saying bullshit on, Twitter. They seem to be very like quiet, focused, reserved, and really focused on execution. So lots for all of us to learn from the folks who run Razorpay.
Speaking of founders who put a lot of bullshit out there, Ashneer Grover's third unicorn has raised over $3.5 million. But he raised $3.5 million from nearly 30 investors. That's like a bit of a low raise, but for his fantasy sports platform called CricPe. Okay. Interesting name. From BharatPay to CricPe. Okay, fair enough. Get that reference. Third unicorn is basically Ashneer and his wife Madhuri Jain. They started this venture. They're targeting the fantasy sports genre. And they've also kind of brought in Dubai-based blockchain services firms executive Asim Gowri as a co-founder. Do you know about BlockTech Brew, which is the company which Asim Gowri was a part of? So yes, that's what you do to blockchain. Once it doesn't work, you put it into a brew and you drink it. Is what BlockTech Brew does.
Guys, this joke is rehearsed. Varun practiced it thrice before saying it out into the mic during recording.
Still didn't work. But nevertheless, he's obviously going against Dream11, who's really built this multifaceted business out of it. So it is a huge area of growth.
Yeah,
a lot of opportunity there, but tough one to kind of start off in right now. I'd say that it's a bit of and also it's called CricPay, which means maybe just focusing on cricket, which again reduces what he can kind of do, because cricket is not the only sport people are interested about. You're missing out on, let's say, esports, etc. with this as well. But again, it's Ashneer Grover. You're going to have a lot of noise coming out of this one, so we'll see how that goes.
And hopefully no more drama. But in other news, do you want to tell us?
Drama. Where there's
Do you want to tell us what car you own and then get into this segment, Varun?
No, I'm not going to get into this. So Mercedes-Benz E-Class is getting a touchscreen, TikTok and a selfie camera. That's a recent article came out about that. Interestingly, Mercedes in the past has said that don't have touchscreens because next to the driver, because the driver
Who did they say this
distracted.
To, Varun? Who did they say this? Who did they say this to? Why did they say it to you, Varun? Varun?
Because I have a car of a similar name, which I have. I'm now being very sheepish about it. But yes, I was told that when we were getting the car saying that's the reason they don't have it. So it's interesting. Now they're putting TikTok on it, which means imagine a driver sitting and trying to swipe on that, which doesn't make sense. I would hope it would be in the back seat, but no, it's in the front seat. So it's an interesting piece of news.
But I love this too. TikTok's going everywhere. TikTok really is going everywhere.
Yeah, but also there's the continued conversation of their ban goes on. And plus there was an interesting article about how Apple might actually be one of the reasons why TikTok would lose a big chunk of the US market because they might put restrictions onto their data capturing. And so it's not the US government that might do it in the US. It might actually be Apple who will put restrictions. So there is some stuff happening in the background, which could be think about it, like what Apple did to Meta and their entire third-party tracking piece and how that scaled up, and Google had to follow suit. So when Apple does it, I'm sure Google will follow suit, and suddenly TikTok has this problem of Android and iOS both
Where do I go
restrictions.
From here?
Exactly. So let's see how that plays out. In other news, Fab India withdraws their 4,000 crore IPO due to non-conducive market conditions. Makes sense. I mean, a lot of people are holding back from their IPO filing. Yeah. But although it might be a good time pretty soon for Fab India to go for an IPO, don't you think? Because they're still a good business.
I think Fab India obviously is, one of those businesses that has truly stood the test of time. But I think with a lot of retail businesses, right, everyone's still recuperating from the losses that they incurred in 2 years of COVID. So I know retail's picked up significantly. Obviously, OND was fantastic for retail. In fact, we've seen a cool down in e-com and a lot of those spends go back to, more offline shows. But 2 years of bleeding money, you know what I mean? 2 years of holding inventory, that's not going to be something very easy to sort of bounce out of. Though, I absolutely love what Fab India is doing. I don't know if you've had a chance to see their Instagram of late or even just their website, their in-store collections. They've really made the brand young, fun and vibrant. I like the direction that they're going in, and I hope all of their bets play off because Fab India is a company that should do well
I haven't seen. I'm going to check out their website and the Instagram now. Right after we do this recording, you gotta get me some kurtas. Gotta get me some
Do
kurtas.
it. And last news for the day is
your favorite company. One of your favorite companies. My favorite, actually. I'm a user. I actually have to order food after this on that. Zomato-owned grocery platform Blinkit is reportedly planning to enter India's hyperlocal services segment. They're going to have handyman services, plumbing, AC repairs. Basically, urban company is going to be in Blinkit. But what think you of this one more thing that Blinkit is doing? Blinkit and Blinkit adds another thing.
I mean,
The
you
silence
just said
is
I
telling.
shouldn't go on rants. So I'm going to bite my tongue and hold
please
myself back.
Please go on rant. Please go on rants.
Varun, why don't you start first?
Here's my perspective. I think at some point, I still don't understand why it's a separate platform and why wouldn't Zomato just integrate it into their platform. This seems like an odd thing to add. It's like they're trying to find more ways to generate revenue. So they just found this urban company model, building it in there. But again, what it also takes, why urban company did well is they didn't go aggregator model. They actually trained people eventually moved to a model where everybody who is an urban company technician who comes in is trained. And I don't know if they're employed, but I know that there's been a lot less aggregation, a lot more like in-housing that's happened over there. So I get a huge expense. And also the numbers aren't massive in this space. So it seems like a random addition, which might not give them as much revenue is how I look at it.
Super random addition.
Yes.
Yeah, man. I think Blinkit is just like the gift that keeps on giving for things to talk about on Think Fast. I'll leave it at that. And you brought up a super valid point, right? You want to add a business stream to a company, at least add a business stream that's shown high margins and profitability. Urban company, I love UC. I use them 24/7. Every
brand.
week someone from UC is coming to my house. But again, if you look at their financials, northward of about 500 crores of revenue, but at northward of close to about 500 crores of loss, if I'm not mistaken. But totally agree with you, man. Not the best segment to sort of emulate, especially when you're already running a heavy loss-making business. And I feel like they're almost coming up with reasons to keep Blinkit separate and not just bring it into the fold of Zomato.
I still don't get why.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you just make it a part of the same platform? Also, then you can really hyper-focus it on a certain segment and really build it out from there. And by the way, I just realized we have had a very long introduction. And if you continue talking about
24
Zomato,
minutes only.
24 minutes only.
But we're going to cut out my faux pas in the beginning, aren't we?
Yes. No, we're not. Just in case the faux pas gets edited out. What we heard in the beginning was Rani ki Jhansi instead of Jhansi ki Rani. So that shall not be edited out of this episode.
That was a mistake. I am tired. I've had a long Monday. Okay, but let's take a break and be back.
So we'll take a break. And before we go for a break, what are we talking about this week? We're talking about the Indus Valley Report from Blume. Some interesting insights. We're picking up our most interesting insights from that. The new YouTube head put out a blog post picking up what he's really focusing on for 2023. Plus, we're going to do a bit of a chat on curated marketplaces. And but before all of that, first, we shall take a break. We'll come back and we will talk about Rani ki Jhansi.
Oh my God.
Welcome back to Think Fast, where we are going to start off talking about today's Indus Valley Report. Oh no, Blume Ventures Indus Valley Report for this year. I mean, I've always looked forward to this one. I think they started only last year, right? Or have they had this one before that as well?
Correct.
I remember reading last year's and it was really interesting just to see the insights they've really drilled out. Extensive. Always there's stuff you can pull out and say, this is interesting. That's an insight I want to kind of use. What stood out for you on a broad sense?
What stood out for me on a broad sense? Number one, I am right, guys. I am right. My number one prediction of last year is coming through strong. And when I say last year, I mean the one that I made in December 2022 for 23. E-com, advertising revenue on e-com platforms is really growing, and it's possibly the fastest growing revenue segment for e-com platforms, which was my prediction. And I am glad I have data to now back it up. But, keeping self-clapping and self-congratulations aside, I think a couple of things. Number one was just a slide number 18, which spoke about how the Indian diaspora, super interesting cohort of Indians, right? 18 million people large, transferred $100 billion into India well over the FDI received. Now, obviously, Varun and I were talking about, where did this money really go, apart from, whatever, like helping family members out and this, that and the other. But this was wild, man. 18 million people driving $100 billion.
And everybody we'll link up, we'll put a link to the report in the show notes so everyone can kind of get this and see. The interesting part here was that if you look at the trend, it's always been remittances being higher than FDI, right? The only point when it got really tight and close enough was 2020 and 2021, where it's like, say, 80 billion FDI and 83 billion remittances. But now we're back to like 80, 100. So it also kind of, I think the two parts of this is that I feel a lot of Indians from abroad are finding investment opportunities here because the markets everywhere aren't great. And also I think they're really spending in areas which they didn't have opportunity to spend on in the past. And I feel it's also been made easier for many NRIs to kind of invest and even like buy stuff here. But I want to kind of see how much this trend expands. I mean, are we seeing a trend where you're going to see more and more of remittances increase? And also maybe this is why the budget had a lot of additions of when you're spending stuff abroad, etc. A lot of that stuff being brought in. So maybe there's a broader insight somewhere in the data, which kind of will give us more details.
Yeah, no. And for me, the second slide second and third slide that actually stood out was just the pace at which it's a very like tiny trend, but just the way at which regional angel networks are growing. Yeah. I mean, there's the Jharkhand Angels, there's a Chandigarh Angel Network, there's
Calcutta Angels,
Yeah, there's like so many Chennai Angels, Stanford Angels. There's so many interesting little, swarms of angel networks that exist around India. And obviously I wouldn't say thank Shark Tank for it, because I think there's way too many angel investors and investors who build the segment, who build this, asset class, so to speak, up fairly well. But this I found very interesting. Regionalization of capital.
And you're right, Shark Tank helped accelerate it, but it has been something that's been going on now for a bit.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel what really changed this space, and that's my insight into it, is that when COVID happened, we moved from an angel scenario where you had to like have a certain setup to go meet, etc. Your physical meetings went away. Decks start coming in on WhatsApp, not even email. People start creating WhatsApp groups where, a group of friends who are all angel investors kind of came together. One of them formed a syndicate and you were investing through that. I feel that really helped kind of push through this trend where suddenly someone who wasn't in a major city, who didn't have access to those meetings, could get that deck and offer to put in money. Yeah. I want to see how this trend scales up, because what ends up happening is people do invest in that first cycle. You have to run through, let's say, a 5-6 year period at least to figure out, are you going to make money out of your angel investment? I want to understand how many people continue to invest in this class if they don't see enough returns. Because the whole point of angel investing is you have to be okay with that money disappearing. And the fact that money might amount to nothing tomorrow. So beyond a point, how many people really have the stomach for that if the investments they don't work is going to be a thing. You also already saw a lot more angel checks kind of go down in this space. Just the madness that was 2021 went down. But I feel that's why they're all joining these kind of groups. They're not doing it as individuals, like they're being part of these angel networks and groups who are extremely active on platforms like LinkedIn and Twitter. They honestly reach out. I've had a bunch of reach outs and conversations in the past where a bunch of them reach out and say, this is what we're curating. We'd love for you to be part of it. So that way they actually spend a lot of time in bringing people in. And I feel that's actually been one of the secret sauces, that you've actually built community around it. You haven't just focused on getting someone's money.
Yeah, no, I love your description. Obviously, you're much more involved in the community on the angel network side than I am. And you're right, there's this sense of belonging. And I think for a lot of, angel investors, it's also a way to give back. You know what I mean? Versus just looking at it as what ROI or multiple will you give me on this? And I think the last slide, and then we'll get to your, favorite slides and sections of the deck. But the last slide that's stood out for me was slide number 48. It was not the last slide, but one of the slides, which basically is titled, "There is a brutal power law in most Indian consumer transactions." For example, Zomato, apparently 5% of users are responsible for about 33% of orders placed.
That's crazy.
1% of Indians account for 45% of all flights. this number was just mind-blowing. 6.5% of users are responsible for 44% of transactions on platforms like, UPI, GPay, Paytm, PhonePe, and more. This power law is wild, bro. It's almost like no matter where India goes, it still, leans back to your top 10 to 15 million, odd consumers or your 30 million households. What do you make of this?
I feel one of the anomalies of our countries is always this space that you look at the population, you assume that's the consumer space. But I feel if we actually dig deeper, and we've spoken about this a lot on the podcast, right? Like if you look at it deeper, you realize that the actual consumer space within the broader population is very different. And if brands don't really latch onto that, then and even like founders and companies, then they are in for trouble, because you're saying I'm building for $1 billion, but you're not necessarily building for $1 billion. And this kind of shows that in many ways. I think that the core insight in this, which I find interesting, is the fact that, we always talk about building for a billion, and I think on this show, we've spoken a lot about the actual consumer base of India being far smaller in terms of actual spending power. This shows that, right? And when companies don't really get that and they're building for a product base for $1 billion, where your product will actually not be bought by so many people, that really is trouble coming their way. And this data actually kind of almost like puts a stamp on that, saying this is the actual reality of the Indian consumer, where you're not talking to $1 billion, you're talking to maybe the top like 5-10% of the entire population, and that's the actual consumer base.
But that's been a fact for a while. I feel like people who like peddled, I feel like companies that peddle this whole, India tier 2, 3 plus, this whole Bharat segment, right? Which was on every single pitch deck in 2019 to about 2021. In fact, I remember there was a point when it was almost unfashionable to go to investors and say that I'm building for the top 1% Indians. And, now when you sort of take stock of where those Bharat bets have played out, there hasn't necessarily been anything that's that impressive that's come out of it. Like there was a slide in the deck which showed the numbers of content platforms like ShareChat or Roposo or any of these other guys. I think the one company that perhaps stands out is Glance. But remember, Glance is a consortium of touch points, right? It's like Google Display Network. To me, this whole sort of space of go beyond, even Meesho, bets are still out on what way will Meesho land. Will it truly be a disruptor of Flipkart, Amazon plus? Or will it end up being this, Sasta Tikau destination on the internet, kind of like what Snapdeal became, after which it then had to sort of, change its path and trajectory and get back into spaces that makes it stand out. So for me, it would be, these pieces with respect to that India versus Bharat story. But let's switch it over to you, bro. What stood out for you? What were your big highlights from the Indus Valley Report?
Few things. One is, I know we spoke earlier about the... I think the Peter Thiel piece we spoke about in the introduction, plus we also spoke about angels. But what's kind of happening, and the interesting slide is, I think, slide 79. We talk about how seed rounds are supersizing. So generally, when someone went in for their early seed round, the numbers are far smaller. But what's really happening is that there's still a lot of capital flowing for that category, because people aren't, the minimum amount that people would raise in seed was far lower than what it is today. And that seems to be an interesting trend to kind of look into, because two things are happening. One is there's capital available at this scale, and people in growth aren't really raising as much, which is actually the slide before this. But you also have a lot of repeat founders, founders who actually build businesses, they're operators, and then they're going and building again by saying, I've already done this, I'm building something else. And so a lot of that is flowing to them as well. So these two things are interesting to look at when you're seeing which companies are getting funded, who's raising that big seed round. And you're going to continue to see, I feel, seed rounds growing in scale. But the growth rounds of investments are going to be tougher to bring in till the market improves. So everybody in growth is really, whoever raised enough money early on and is sitting on it are doing well. The ones who didn't are struggling. So I think the seed part is interesting, because it's definitely an interesting, it allows many more businesses to start at a certain scale.
Yeah, I agree with that, man.
The other one which really caught my eye, and because you know me, I'm a bit of a media junkie, was there was this whole point about how in the media space, what's happened because of OTTs is that people are actually willing to pay for subscriptions. As long as they're tinier amounts, as long as they're not like major sized amounts,
like
people are actually paying for it.
Of sorts.
Yeah, so you look at platforms like Stage.
Even Pratilipi, for that matter.
Yeah.
like small payments.
Pratilipi, Stage, and which is also what's leading to this happening, because this is that most of these newer media startups are going subscription first. So the interesting part also to look here is that most newer media startups are going subscription first because of UPI and the business model. So you have Pocket FM, Coco FM on one end, you also have Stage on the other end. They're all kind of going into this focusing, let's get tinier amounts from people. Let's really like razor focus on a certain category, and people are willing to pay. So it's as much as, the bigger players like a Netflix, etc., might not be getting in as much and they've had to lower their subscription amounts. These guys are starting smaller and they're really being able to get in more active paid users. And so I think that's really a great insight on the media space. What do you think of that?
No, on the same page as you, bro. Like I had, posted this tweet recently where I said that this is genuinely the best time to build social media platforms. And you're totally right in the Indian context. You saw that with the Ferrari example also, right? It'll be these, I don't want to say trivial payments, because trivial for one, maybe, non-trivial for another. But payments where you can almost through your time spent justify ROI. Right. And you're seeing versions and iterations of it even on, I know we're going to talk about this story next, but YouTube, for example, and their focus on courses and using courses as a light way of enabling creator monetization and hopefully building this interesting, middle class of creators on the internet. So totally with you on this and spot on. The larger platforms almost train and teach consumers to pay for content, even if it is in small bits and pieces, in fragmentations, the better it is for all of us building in the general space of, media plus.
So there are a few more insights there, but I think this largely covers the main things which wrote for me. Anybody who wants to get a deeper dive, please download the report. We'll link it up in the show notes. And we shall move then to our next story, which is on my now quickly become favorite platform, YouTube, and their new CEO's first blog about where his focuses are for YouTube in the year ahead. Obviously, Neil Mohan has been around for a while. He was head of product before he took over from the OG. And I think a lot of it was more of the same, just extensions of what they've already been doing, which is what YouTube always does. But I think the interesting part is some of the data points, right? There's one piece that really stood out for me is that YouTube's creative ecosystem supported more than 2 million jobs in 2021 across Brazil, Canada, US, Indonesia, Japan, South Korea, France, Australia, Germany, the UK, India, and Turkey. 2 million jobs just in these countries.
That's wild. What are these jobs though? Is it like creator jobs or like agency jobs or like what kind of jobs?
So you'll have creators who are making money off this. You have people who are working with creators. You have people who are doing courses through it. You have people who are working on streaming. So I think front end, back end, all of that together, it's an entire creator ecosystem built on top of YouTube. Because you talk to most creators, and we mentioned this in the past as well, is that having a YouTube base is like the gold standard. You might have like 1 million followers on Instagram, but if you have a million followers, if you even get like a quarter of that on YouTube, the creator's happier because it's more sustained. It feels more robust. It's not as stuck on the whims and fancies of the algorithm. All the YouTube shorts has kind of added that into the mix for them. But I feel that what also was interesting in terms of how we spoke, he obviously puts creators at the center of everything. But they're also speaking about how, they're looking at more revenue streams for creators right now. How can we expand on subscriptions? How can we expand on community shopping? They're investing into shopping heavily. And so unlike Meta, who said Tata to shopping, YouTube's investing into shopping. So there are areas they're focusing on to grow. I feel the interesting part was community, because that's YouTube communities generally they either function in comments. The actual community tab on YouTube is almost like this you use it for some amount of engagement, but it's not really a big deal for people to follow. But they're definitely tapping into that. Plus, I feel the other part that was interesting was they're also pushing for a lot of growth on YouTube TV. TV was their fastest growing screen last year. So it makes sense that they're focusing a lot on that.
On a first principles basis, what do you think YouTube gets right? Because again, I know we've discussed this multiple times in the past, but fundamentally, what do you think it is in YouTube's DNA which empowers it to do so much? Whether it's on mediums that it streams or, its initiatives and efforts around creator community. What do you think YouTube fundamentally has got right?
YouTube's always been a creator first platform, and they've never tried to be social. They've never tried to be something else. They've always a creator first, they're almost like what television needs to be like on the internet in its most classical sense, right? You make money off ads, you make money through, paid subscriptions for certain kinds of content. For other pieces, you have live streams, which are literally like live TV. So if you look at, that's exactly what TV needs to be in today's world. YouTube's always had that razor focus. They've not digressed saying, oh, suddenly YouTube will become metaverse, so YouTube will become, a social network, or we'll do something else with it. They've stuck to their guns. Like, even my only worry when YouTube Shorts came out was, are they going to go like to TikTok? But even that's built so smartly. It integrates seamlessly into the platform, doesn't feel jarring. And the shorts really help the long videos. The long videos help the shorts. So I would say they get that right. They look at it like television. They look at this
basically,
like
they know how to build ecosystems.
Yeah.
Unlike, Meta, which does things in silos. Remember my last rant when the Facebook team got very upset because I went on and on about how like Instagram needs to take a cue from YouTube, this, that, and the other. No, but you're right, man.
Someone called us out on Twitter.
Didn't call us out. I was saying the right thing, and exactly what I've said is what's played out in my defense. Out that only,
I said, how can you say this? But
how can she slap? How can she slap?
I feel the other piece to look at here is also YouTube Shorts has scaled phenomenally. It's the core area they're really focusing on. But I feel they're also building interesting tools in that. Again, Instagram has Remix, which is a way for you to take someone's video, add your own reaction on the side, or add your reaction at the end of the video. YouTube's launching something similar, but now you're going to be able to record a short, and in a side-by-side layout, you can kind of add your own reaction to it, which feels more native to YouTube because reaction videos on YouTube are a genre to themselves. It's what a lot of us consume. Reaction video creators are almost like curators you follow for how they're looking at actual content, commenting on it. So again, it makes sense here for them to add it, but they didn't launch it immediately after somebody else did. They build it smartly, they build it slow, and it's good to also have the head of product coming in to run the business because he obviously has an idea about how they've made this kind of flow in. And also the whole podcast piece, right, is that they're going deep into podcasts. And we spoke about that recently as well. That's going to be interesting to see how is that separate tab, and it's been tested. Some people have shown it where you have a video tab, a shorts tab. You also will have a podcast tab on profiles, which in a sense means that you can have different kinds of durations of videos without watch time being affected, which makes, it just changes the game for any podcast creator.
Yeah. Do you know who the biggest loser in all of this is, in my opinion?
Spotify?
Oh Meta? My God, aapne man ki baat bol di. I was going to say Spotify is doing everything that Spotify should have thunk about.
Now that you say it, today is 6th of March when we're recording this episode. I think today is the Spotify event. It'll be interesting to talk about what Spotify announces in their annual event, which is happening, I think, right? Or was it yesterday? I'll have to check. I think it's today or later tonight, maybe. But it'll be interesting to see how they've reacted to this because I think globally there's been a bit of almost like an internal shudder within Spotify, right? They've had to really change their podcast first model. They've had to change acquiring these really expensive shows from celebrities.
Yeah, we discussed this last episode.
So we got to see how they react because their announcement day is today. They're talking about how they've done and what they're going to do. So I think it'd be good to kind of pick that up when we do next week's episode.
Lovely. Let's do that. And on to the next, brother.
Before we do that, we shall take a break. When we come back, we shall discuss curated marketplaces. It's a lovely term, curated marketplaces. Have that with a cup of tea, I say. Welcome back to Think Fast, where our cup of tea has been had virtually. And we're talking about curated marketplaces. Why are we talking about curated marketplaces?
मुझे मत शुरू करवाओ यार, मत शुरू करवाओ. Then again, I'm going to go for it. And then you'll say, there you go, Jhansi ki Rani is at it again.
Rani ki Jhansi.
Yes. So, there obviously has been this emergence of a new kind of, let's just call it investor pitch and some semblance of a consumer proposition of, curated marketplace. And, we've obviously seen companies, I don't know if you saw this, but Open Secret has, I don't want to say pivoted, but they've added this sort of, layer of becoming a marketplace to discover and buy healthy, junk-free snacks and stuff like that, on the internet. And then obviously there's a platform called Kind Life, which was launched by Radhika Ghai, she is the co-founder of ShopClose. And, there's platforms like Brown Living and a couple of others that have come up that are basically taking these like tiny I want to say very like India wants super alpha niches. And are trying to make a go off of, building some amount of demand supply engines, within their offering to consumers. Now, as someone who I want to say has like, and not to say we did the world's most slam dunk job of that, but as someone who's used all these terms before, right? Like, I think I can safely say LBB used discovery as a way of building consumer products before a lot of other companies, as did we use things like, curated local brands, homegrown brands, plus. So I have a whole shindig on this, but just to set context for our listeners, when we're discussing curated marketplaces, this is exactly what we mean. What is your take on these, man? Where do you see the opportunity? Where do you see the niche? Do you see these scaling? Are they VC fundable businesses?
I think there's some categories which are interesting. I feel that how much will they scale might be a question, but I think some categories, and I know that you and I have had perspectives on this, right? If you look at something like, let's say, a Brown Living, or there's another company called One Green, which I'm an early investor in. They're curating under a certain thought process. So it's generally, for both of them, it's focused on stuff that's more sustainable, more conscious. And while it feels smaller, you're still catering to a very niche audience. I feel there is enough people there for purchasing power in that category. And it makes it easier because you're normally looking in different places to buy those products. And Amazon feels like this big sea of things to find. And you don't know if you find them on Instagram. So it's good to have that curated and buy it from one place. Cred's another example of really having this within the platform. It's a feature, not a platform to itself, which I think is an interesting way to look at it. So I would say that unless you pick a category that works really well for you and you feel there's depth of consumer, or you have it as a feature within a platform like Cred does, I feel in other cases it doesn't make sense. I think the more premium the consumer, the more the curated marketplace actually might work, has been my belief.
I fundamentally disagree with everything you've said. And my reason for saying that is, a couple of things. One, most categories, apart from fashion and home, are basket categories. And what that basically means is that, when you go to a big basket or a supermarket or whatever else, you rarely ever go to buy one thing. You go with a sort of laundry list in hand, right? The same applies to beauty as a category. It applies to pretty much all of FMCG. And that's really where you're seeing this whole curated quote unquote marketplace piece come up. And the problem with being in this space of like basket level categories is, whether you like it or not, over a period of time, you will become the thing that you sought out to not be, especially in the two categories that I just mentioned. And I think the second part of it, so one obviously is, curated marketplace, quote unquote, maybe an interesting consumer proposition to acquire consumers. And just to sort of correct you, I don't think Cred's USP was ever its curation. Cred's USP was
I'm saying more about a feature. I think more as a feature within a platform is my only thing.
Sure, exactly. And Cred does a lot for its consumers. It's, heavily discounted e-com, offering is like a fraction of it. I think they've got more interesting things on their platform than their marketplace. But basically, so that's one part of my pushback, right? Which is what even is a curated marketplace in categories where consumers buy in basket. And I think the second thing is, I love going back to the framework of, jobs to be done for consumers. And when you look at the framework of jobs to be done, the question that anyone has to sort of answer, especially in these basket type categories of beauty, personal care and FMCG, is what are you replacing? Where is the thing that what does the consumer currently do which you're a, more efficient, qualitative, better substitute to? And in all the conversations that I've had with people who've been building in this space, none of them have a compelling enough answer. And that doesn't mean that businesses can't be successful. So for example, I think ways in which founders can think about solving for segments like BPC and FMCG with quote unquote curated marketplace as an offering is like, sampling is a really interesting value proposition. So, can you become the first port of consumer discovery? Can you become the first port of, consumers knowing that you exist as a brand? But I feel like consumers will always go back to wherever they're making these basket purchases, right? They will go back to the Amazon. They will go back to, the big basket or wherever else these basket purchases are being made. So not an unsolvable problem, but I think the lens at which you look at building up your business model needs to be much more exotic than just following the same business model as an Amazon, as a Big Basket, or as anyone else. And I think that's why Cred is an interesting example, right? They've very clearly taken the stance that e-com for us is just a way to keep our consumers engaged and to have, them experience, test, try out Cred as a platform. And obviously, being able to claim products at crazy discounts is dopamine for a certain class of consumers. So I'll park my thoughts there. But what is your tippany on my... What a measured rant, bro. What a measured rant.
Very well done. Well measured, I would say. I get where you're coming from. And I would largely say that what you're saying holds true. I would just say some categories, some reason I feel that for a very urban 1% audience, especially, and even like post-COVID in that scenario where you've looked at things, they are looking for those. You have to build something, I agree, beyond just the same use case that you would get on Amazon. What more are you giving them? And unless the platform builds that into it, I don't know if you can really compete in the long term with an Amazon or a Big Basket. But I feel the opportunity is there. Like what do you build in as an added feature, which can't be immediately copied, or which also doesn't take you away from your essence.
Yeah,
I think that's really where growth or like scalability will really lie. Even if you look at you mentioned Open Secret. I think interesting for them to really hyper focus in this way. Again, I feel Open Secret, the tough part they're going to have is as they add more categories, what differentiates you from a Big Basket? Can you really scale like a Big Basket becomes the question. So versus someone who's doing like the one thing which I know you and I've had many back and forth on is the whole like conscious buying platforms. It's still come under category. You have a bit of a you can add in pieces like you have ratings of saying, okay, how actually conscious is this? And you can bring in elements like that, which a feature which won't come up generally on bigger platforms. And if someone really has that focus, they will bite off these platforms. So I feel the Open Secret way to go has a tougher road ahead than if you're going very like sustainable and conscious. Where if you
also, bro, you're going to have to go retail. So for example, I live in a neighborhood where there's a really cool, very niche store called Nature Soul. And the world and its mother flocks to Nature Soul. But, one, you never purchase single items, same shit. You purchase a basket of goods. Nature Soul also has that, proposition of healthy, good for you, junk-free, organic, plus. But I feel like these categories of, rich people impulse purchases, so to speak, are best served in retail as a format. Like Food Hall is a great example, or even Godrej Nature's Basket is a very good example, or actually most modern trade is a good example of, of Shokino ki expenses. But I don't know. I don't know if e-com
so not
as
just
a standalone
I think more healthy options. I think the healthier, more conscious, sustainable. If you can bring in things which aren't as expensive as well, but you can almost have for instance, I know One Green has an entire rating system. I think every product they have, they give you a rating of how, across how they have a certain benchmark of how they can look at each product and build that out. I thought that's an interesting add-on piece. It's almost like a stamp you're adding in. You have a lot of these curated platforms which don't even sell. Forgetting the name of the platform which I spoke to the founder a while back. And I feel there is something there in that category then to go, I would say, Open Secret, which for me doesn't still have there's no central differentiator between an Open Secret and a Big Basket except for scale. Whereas here I can at least see there's a differentiator, except the only problem here is how big is this market is always the question.
It is small, and that's not a bad thing, but just acknowledge that,
not every company has to be unicorns.
Yes, though I love Ahana at Open Secret and I hope her company does extremely, 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 extremely well. So rooting for you, Ahana. You go, girlfriend. You go.
So we'll take a quick break, come back, we'll do quick recommendations and say, Toodles, have good holies. Oh, actually, how was your holi? Welcome back to Think Fast, where it is time for recommendations. What are you recommending? I'm going to let you recommend first.
Oh my God, what a shocker. So I am recommending my own article that I've written. I'm plugging in myself, guys, for a change.
Well done.
I've learned from Varun.
You're learning from
but
me.
Please go to suchitasalvan.medium.com. And I just wrote, in my opinion, actually a pretty interesting article, which I'd love your guys' feedback /opinion on how building for premium use cases is greater than building for premium customers. And the only reason I'm recommending it is because I think it ties in very well with our last with the piece that we just discussed around curated marketplaces. So please go to my Medium and read my most recent blog post on why I think premium use cases is a better job to be done than premium customers as a customer cohort. And you, my friend?
What am I recommending? I actually want to recommend a brand which I've been a consumer of for the last 6 months and I absolutely love it. It's a small indie brand called Delight Foods you find on Amazon. I'm a Gulti who loves his pickles, and Delight Foods has been this find for me because apart from having my mother ship pickles from back home, getting the authentic taste of an actual pickle without that, you have those extra ingredients there. They've actually been amazing at it. Delight Foods, and I shall give 2 recommendations for people who want to have more pickles in their lives.
Oh my God.
Are you a pickle eater? Amoga's Pickle
Dude,
Factory.
I love pickles.
Amoga's Pickle
the way,
Factory and Delight Foods are 2 great. Amoga's actually is even better packaging.
Oh my God, bro, you have to try Old Fashioned Gourmet. They used to sell on LBB. So good. Their pickle, their mango pickle is like God's gift. Oh, Vataj. Aapne dil ki baat bol di.
I shall check. I'm a pickle aficionado.
Who would have thought?
Whatever that. Who would have thought? I'm Gulti, obviously. Yes. I had pickles and everything. I've had pickles with alcohol also.
You keep saying Gulti. What the hell is that?
People from Andhra who are Telugu speaking are called Gultis.
Acha, okay. Thanks for that. TIL, GPT, Gulti.
TIL, GPT, yes. Gulti. TIL, GPT, Gulti. And on that note, hope your Holi was good. Hope you didn't get stinkied with andas and with color. And we shall see you all next week. Now you also know why the episode was delayed, because we recorded just before Holi. Toodles.
Happy Holi!
Ho gaya Holi, kya happy Holi?
Acha, belated happy Holi!
Fair enough, belated happy Holi.